welcome to another Discover Trempealeau County show. We're having kind of a special show today. We've got Nancy Bergman with us. She's one of the hosts. She's the host of the farm.
That's anything. No.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You're thinking about our camera person,
Mary Anderson,
Yeah,
Farmer's Corner.
You bet.
With the county agent, Steve Hockenich.
Yeah.
And she does a beautiful job. Now she's doing the filming for today's show.
Multi-talented.
And we got Nancy Bergman here. She's real active in the Historical Society. I'm not so sure if maybe she isn't the only one in the Historical Society.
I have helpers. My main thing is I do the website for the Historical Society. And then people that are interested, we will run that website at the end of the show, where you can go on there and look at lots of pictures and documents and a lot of history about the county. So that's what I mainly do. We
also want to thank Mr. Malum, Don Malum. He's in the nursing home down at Blair. He was the one that's kind of what we're going to cover today is three things. One is the Carpenter Cemetery, which we think has got the largest stone and the biggest stone any place in any cemetery in Trempealeau County. And he had a number of shows, and he's the one that put me on to try and get the show out there, and he was going to help, but things didn't work out for him. I want to thank him for getting us motivated. We're going to cover really three things today. We're going to cover the Carpenter School. Carpenter School is right behind us here.
Right behind us, across the road.
And you put together a book about that thick on all 111 schools here in Trempealeau County. You were the main person, you wrote a lot of them, and you coordinated it.
Yeah, I don't want to take a lot of credit, but I just was more of a coordinator, let's say.
But that was done quite a number of years ago.
1988, actually.
And there was still a lot of teachers from the one-room school that were still living.
There were.
So you got a lot of input from a lot of these people that knew quite a bit about the one-room schools. They had 111 of them here in Trempealeau County. 110, okay.
That was counting a couple of parochial schools, the one down in Pine Creek and the one in North Creek. So yeah.
And I happened to go to a one-room school.
Yeah.
One-room school. We could talk about the one-room school a little bit later. But we're going to be mainly talking about the Carpenter School. And this Carpenter has that big stone. There's a bridge over here. They call it Carpenter Bridge. We also have the school, the bridge, and then the big stone, the huge stone in the cemetery. He must have been a very, very important person, or a very rich person, or something.
Yeah.
And so I think that when we get to the cemetery, we'll talk a lot about the stone over there. But right now, we want to talk about the Carpenter School. Okay. So why don't you tell us a little about the Carpenter School? You can see it behind us. It's a school that now is a residence.
Right, yeah. Well, what I could find out was it was started, and I think it was and the land was purchased from a lady called Ellen Snyder. But when I looked on an 1877 map, Henry Carpenter's land was all around the school where it is now. So apparently this was part of the Carpenter farm. And the first teacher was a man by the name of Phineas Williams. I don't know, maybe somebody out there, they'll claim him as a relative. And I imagine, I don't have any pictures of the first school, but it must have been of wood. And in 1924, it burned, and that happened to a lot of schools because they burned wood and they burned coal, and the school was wood, and it just went out. But they did rebuild it. I think it was totally rebuilt in 1924, the same year that it burned, and made out of brick. So that is the building that is behind us. That is Carpenter School that has been recycled into a residence. And they said in 1961, Carpenter became part of the Blair School District. And Carpenter had resisted for many, many years closing their rural school. People were really wanting to keep it open, and then in 1961 the state withdrew funding to rural schools, and they didn't have much choice. They kind of had to get consolidated, and that was when it closed. And the last teacher was Victoria Nelson. So maybe people will recognize that name, Victoria Nelson.
Well, I had the privilege, I guess you'd say, of going to a one-room school, and it looks a lot like this. I've never been on the inside, but it looks a lot like the school, Carpenter School. You entered, then you went down in the basement with steps and the bathrooms. They had bathrooms.
Indoor
bathrooms.
That was a big deal.
Nobody had bathrooms back then. Nobody had bathrooms at home. They had outhouses,
right.
You know. So that was really something special to have the bathrooms right in the school. And then you took up a few steps and you went upstairs, and that was the classroom, and that's where a small library was. And one thing about those country schools, there was a community. You know, it was a community involved. We had people come in. I remember the first black person I ever saw doing tap dancing is one of the shows. Every month they had musical things going. Usually
Really?
The kids were participating. And they had outsiders that come in that were talented, and boy, that was really a thrill. I can remember that like it was yesterday. Tap dance.
What was the school?
Big Creek.
Up by Oliva.
Up by Oliva,
Yeah.
Big Creek. And that had a similar history. That was on the Grant Farm across the road. And I think it was 1921 or something like that. It burned, same thing, burned.
Mm-hmm.
So they moved it across the road. And then they started calling it Big Creek School because the Big Creek is going by, not too far away.
Yeah.
But this Grant, it's got his name from the owner of the farm, and his name was Grant. And he was a second cousin. He was a Civil War veteran, a second cousin to Ulysses Grant, which is kind of unusual. And I remember him raising. You know, it was very rare to see flags flying along homes and so forth and farms, but he always had a flag flying, and I was in first grade, and I remember that. I remember seeing him come out and put the flag up. It was several hundred feet away, but it was visible. And so maybe 30 years ago, I was telling my boys that I went to a Civil War veteran's funeral, you know, and they said, "Oh, no, you're nuts, Dad." They said, "You must be getting Alzheimer's or something," you know. So I thought, well, maybe I better check on that. Maybe I'm wrong, you know. So I went back to the Hamlin Cemetery, where I knew he was buried because I went to the funeral with my dad, and I went to the Hamlins, and there he was. It took me a long time to find his grave, but I found it. I was in first grade when he died. So that's kind of a little story of yeah. And so one thing about the country schools that they had, if you were a mentally fast person, because the teacher was in front teaching every grade, all 8th grades, and if you were mentally fast, and you could go on to the next class, you might say, and learn, you know, beyond. Now, if you're a little slow like me, I couldn't do that, see, but a lot of people did, and it was really important. And I don't know how the Big Creek School, they got good teachers. And the school board was made up of people that graduated from the 8th grade. And they always got good teachers. And we had, most families, there was a valedictorian from the high school that came out of that school. I didn't do it, but my sister was a valedictorian.
Well, good for her.
And so that was a kind of an advantage for people that are quick mentally, you know.
Yeah.
They could learn a lot in the one-room school. The disadvantage, and this happened a lot, the teachers weren't so good. And if they stayed a few years, that was going to have a devastating effect on the students.
Yeah, if they weren't a good teacher.
Yeah.
That can happen in town too, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I'll have to tell you just a little experience. I was going to college. I was in my senior year. A teacher over at Plum City got mononucleosis, and they needed somebody to substitute. So I substituted. I got over there, and I suppose I was there a couple weeks or more, and it was the most frustrating experience I ever had.
Oh.
They don't teach anything about discipline, and I did not have the ability to discipline. So And after I got done with that substitute teaching, I wasn't going to go into teaching.
No more.
No more teaching. And I was my major was agricultural teaching.
Yeah.
So I was really pleased I had that experience. Otherwise, there's a lot of misplaced people in the world.
Well,
you know?
sometimes it takes a while to find your true calling, I guess. So, all right. So
Well, do you have anything else to add about the school here,
No,
Carpenter School?
I guess not. You can see that it still has the bell tower, and it looks about like it did when it was being used, I guess. So I think what we'll do is we'll go on across the road and go over to what they call the Carpenter Cemetery.
Okay, we'll look at the big and largest stone in Trempealeau County.
Okay.
Okie doke. Thank you. Here's the information I got. I cleaned these stones up so you could see something. Oh, they were a mess. I used some stone.
And it's Adelbert.
I cleaned these up. Some of them you couldn't even see.
Yeah, well, that's what happens. They get that
Now, what do you estimate this? What do you estimate the height of this at? Would you say that I'm 6 feet?
Yeah.
Or 1 inch liking 6 feet?
And so it's more than 6 feet.
It looks like it could be close to 7.
Yeah. That is big.
I didn't measure it, but I measured all these.
Yeah.
So I got records of that. Now see, I never really saw this Allen before I got here. This is a little child that died.
Yeah.
5 months and 22 days. Look at these stones over here. Now these are the Allens over here. These were in really bad shape before I started cleaning them.
Well, it's that green.
Yeah, I couldn't even see. Now, boy, this is high. Can you read that?
Justin. Okay. Well,
Justin.
I can tell you what I got on my.
That's he died in 19. The 3 people died here in 1907.
Yeah. So you don't know. It could have been.
Now this is Francis. Now is that a wife of this guy?
Frances was the daughter of Henry Carpenter.
Oh, daughter.
Yes, and she married Justin Allen.
Oh, okay, that's a connection here.
These are the notes that I have. Henry Carpenter was born in Richmond, New York, in 1826, and his father's name was Rowland. And in a census, I found that Rowland was living with Henry here in Wisconsin. So he came west at some time, and Henry married a lady called Mary Allen in 1850, and she, according to the census, was like the girl next door. And they had 6 children, and 4 were still alive in the 1900 census. And before coming to Trempealeau County, they were living down in Walworth County, and that's kind of the pattern of migration you saw of people coming into Wisconsin, at first down in the eastern part and along the Illinois border, and then going farther west as more land opportunity opened up. So now Mary Lake, she was born in 1832. And what I don't know, I wasn't able to make the connection, was if she was actually connected to Henry Lake, who Lake's Coulee is named after. They could be, because Henry Lake was from New York State, and so was Mary. Her father's name was Robert, so there might have been some family connection there, and that was how they all wound up in the same place. Now, Henry and Mary had a son, Adelbert, and who was over there and died young. He also had Fred and Henry Jr., Willie, Maggie, Hetty, and Francis. And Henry Carpenter actually died up in Loyal in Clark County. He must have been living with one of his children up there. And the connection with the Allens is Henry and Mary's daughter Frances married Justin Allen. Justin's parents were Minard and Phoebe. And they had come out here from, I think, New York, as much as I could trace them as well. And Justin is the one that married the daughter of Henry Carpenter. And so that's why you have the Carpenter-Allen connection.
See, I've always wondered about that. You know, after I found out this was an Allen on there, what's the connection?
Yeah.
And there's no Carpenters anymore around.
No,
You know, there's none in the telephone directory, and they had a pretty large family.
Yeah, well,
And so,
yeah, people move farther west or they didn't stay in the area.
so Henry and Mary, they're over where the filming is going on right now.
They're on the
So-
other side of this huge
Yeah.
stone.
Yeah, other side of the huge stone, and I often wondered what the connection was between the two.
Yep. Well, it was
And-
marriage.
And there's only two children that are buried that are carpenters. One is this Adelbert,
Adelbert.
Adelbert,
Yeah.
and he was 27 years old.
Yeah, he died young.
And then there's a little gravestone up
right here.
up next to the big stone here, and that's an infant. That infant was only 5 months and 22 days. That's an infant's.
A daughter, it says.
Yeah, and that's Mary and Henry Carpenter's
Right.
child. So of all the children you mentioned they had, there's only two of them that are here in the cemetery next to this stone.
Right.
And whereas the Allens, they've got Justin, and you said he was married
You're
to
right.
a
Carpenter.
carpenter.
Yeah. Their
So
daughter,
that's a
Frances.
connection.
Yeah. And the Allens were that first came here were Minard and Phoebe, and they came from out east, just like the Carpenters did. And as far as I could find, Phoebe outlived her husband Minard, and in the 1900 census, she was living up in near Osseo with her granddaughter, who was named Mary Herrick. She was married to an Arthur Herrick, and so, yeah, the family got moved up, moved around the county and didn't stay necessarily right here.
Minard, he was born in, that's Minard Allen, was born in 1817. He died in 1892. He's 75 years old.
Well, that
And
was,
his
that was old for those days, too.
And his wife, how do you pronounce that first name? Phoebe. She was born in 1923, died in 1904 at 81 years old. And so they must have, I wonder, did Minard's family come also from, the Allens come from somewhere else?
As far as I could trace them on the internet, they had come from New York State as well, I think.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know if they knew the Carpenters out there, if they just all wound up. They were the Allen farm that I could find on an old map was farther up here, actually, I think in the town of Lincoln, or very close to it.
Mm-hmm.
And the Carpenter farm pretty much was here and over across the river where the school was. That's the Carpenter
Well, we'll look
farm.
at it a little bit later, but we'll look at the farm where Mr. Malum, Don Malum, told me where the Carpenter farm was. And we can
Okay.
see it from here, but we can't, too many trees in the way.
Yeah. Justin
Now-
and Francis Carpenter had a son called Roscoe, and he ended up moving out to South Dakota. And then he was in World War I. He was a quartermaster in the Quartermaster Corps and was in the Remount Division. And my son in the military said that meant that they were responsible for the mules and the horses, getting them places. And he eventually died and is buried out in Nebraska. So this is a family that was just moving west and not necessarily staying in this area.
Well, I did check, like I mentioned, the telephone directory, and I checked the none in Trempealeau County in the telephone directory at least, and there was 3 carpenters in the Eau Claire that covered many counties around Eau Claire. I called one this morning in Mondovi because I thought maybe he'd be a relative, but he didn't know anything about his family history at all. Well, I think we should talk a little about this big stone here.
It is big. I guess I never really noticed how big it was until I got next to it here. It is huge.
When you go by the road, you know, you're going by 25 miles an hour. Don't look that large.
But it is.
But I've got a few dimensions here. Like this bottom right here, this bottom,
the base?
The base, that is 10 feet long and 5.5 feet wide. Now you go to the second level, the second base, I guess you call, that's 8 feet long and 3 feet 9 inches wide. Then you go to the top deal here, the top stone, where the Carpenter and Allen names are on. That's 7 feet long and 2.9 feet wide. So the height, I don't know, I didn't measure any height, but I think it's near 7 feet, don't you?
I think it is.
7 feet. Now we think that this stone here is the largest stone in any cemetery, largest and biggest of any cemetery in Trempealeau County. And we might be a little wrong on that.
Well, we'll have to challenge people. If they've got a bigger one, let us know.
Well, I know there's some higher ones.
Yeah, but this is massive.
But as far as a massive stone.
Yeah.
Now, I was told by Mr. Malum, as you go across or look across the fence here of the cemetery, you're very close to the railroad tracks. And the Carpenter Bridge that comes across the Trempealeau River, they said this stone is too heavy to get it across.
Oh,
you know, it's too heavy to break the bridge down. So they brought it in by the railroad. The railroad went through here. The railroad was 1850.
No, I bet it was more like the 1870s.
1874, because that's the first railroad to come to Whitehall. So that was here, 1874. So I was told they brought it by the railroad, which is just maybe 100 feet away or so from the cemetery here. And Mr. Malum said they used a stump puller type deal to bring the stones in. Now I presume, don't you, that there'd be coming three different layers here.
Well, the logistics are really interesting because that was brought in before the days of tractors and front loaders and
yeah. Well,
so it must have been interesting.
But you know, I remember as a little kid, a stump puller, they were pulling stumps in one of my dad's fields, and what I remember about that, the horses went around in circles.
Yeah, it was like a corkscrew thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like you take the cork out of the top of a bottle, you twist it and twist it, and
then pretty soon the stump comes out.
Right.
Now, how that would work on the stone, I don't know. But
that was just the way they moved it. They winched it along.
Well,
I don't know.
It was a job because it had to be done by horses, you know, or maybe how many horses would it take to pull these stones, you know? It would be immense.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to know the weight.
Yeah.
And so when you see a stone like this, you think they had money to do something like this, you know? They got little stones from themselves on both sides, Allen's on one side and Carpenter's on the other. But there's not too many, you know, only like 2 children. Well, 1 child from the Allens and 2 from the Carpenters, you know, that are buried here. So, and you mentioned in your research that they had quite a family. So for some reason they aren't buried here.
Well, maybe they had moved somewhere else.
Yeah.
like the Justin's son who was buried out in Nebraska. But yeah, so the family just, families move around. They don't all necessarily stay in the same place.
So now we've talked a little about the Carpenter School, the Carpenter Cemetery, the Carpenter Bridge, and all named after the carpenter. He must have been an influential person, a good farmer, and must have got along good with the community. Very likely, because if this is a farm, and we'll take a look at it just a little bit later, he undoubtedly maybe donated or gave this cemetery to the people in this area from the farm.
Now I think this is interesting. Is I didn't realize that there's a GAR flag here, so that means that one of the Carpenters or Allens was a Civil War veteran.
Ah, I hadn't noticed that either.
Yeah. That GAR, Grand Army of the Republic, that meant that they were. So I'd have to look that up somewhere. Yeah. But that's kind of interesting. That kind of dates it too.
Yeah, it really does.
So I can't imagine how much this cost them, along with getting it here and getting it actually set up. It must have been pricey.
Well, Mr. Mallon, and talking with Ralph Johnson, who owned this farm before Ray bought it, he said this came from the eastern United States from somewhere by train. So, what kind of cost would this be back in those kind of days?
Yeah.
And both him and his wife both died 1907 in the same year, according to their tombstones next to the stone. And
there were several people that died that year, so we don't know how they died, if there had been an epidemic of something, or did a house burn down and they were in it. You don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting to know, but or was this a coincidence that that 1907 was a bad year for the family?
Well, maybe we could talk a little bit about the farming, that was done. This, by the way, this cemetery is kind of reverted, I guess you'd say, to some degree. I don't know the whole story on it, but it has become a Amish cemetery.
Oh,
Amish cemetery, and Felty Lambright, who lives right over there, he's responsible for having it mowed and so forth. And there are maybe over 30 Amish people that have been buried here at the cemetery.
I was going to say some of those other names I don't really recognize, like Bestwick. I don't know of anybody by that name here anymore.
No.
And then over there in the corner were people by the name of Lau or Low, L-O-U-W. I don't really know who they were either.
No.
Or Hankin, that was another one
and
I saw.
As you look around, there's a few older tombs and some newer ones also.
Yeah.
Tombstones.
So it's a cemetery that's still being active, I guess you'd call
there's
it.
some
Cemetery can be
there's
active.
a few rather current burials. I saw one over here with 2012.
Yeah.
Now there's a lot of room left in the cemetery.
I see.
A lot of room for more burial.
You could probably get a plot here pretty easily.
Yeah, I think so. But somehow it's turned over to Felty, and he's in charge of keeping it mowed and everything. And
well, that's a big job, taking care of cemeteries.
Boy, that's a big job. Well, maybe we could walk down a little ways and get a look from a distance. You wouldn't see much of the farm, I guess. But if we walk down here, we'll be able to see this farm right over.
What is this? Bachenhauer? Yeah, Bachenhauer. Huh.
Well, that's a different type of tombstone too, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen one.
No dates are quite busy. The tombstones that we just looked at up here, I was out here probably 3 weeks ago and cleaned them up. They had this material on. I don't know what it is, but
it's like a lichen.
I had some stuff that I bought, that let's see, what was the name of it? Tombstone Cleaner is the name of it. And then but I had to use a brush, and I had to get down to even a metal brush to get, because they were so covered you couldn't even see anything. Couldn't see anything. Couldn't see the names or anything.
Lichen, yeah.
This is how they actually age stone, by the speed that the different varieties of lichen grow on it.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, really?
So if you find stones that aren't dated, you can take them to a scientist and they can look at how big these lichen colonies are, and it ages it.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. Our church
This back here was an infant.
vernal, yeah.
Now, this is supposedly the Carpenter farm up here. Do you think we
Next
should?
one down?
Yeah, this one we see. I don't know.
There was their home place.
Should we talk a little about it, or
Sure.
the farm that now being filmed? Was out what I was told was a Carpenter farm. It seems logical that it would be. And it was owned by, at some point, it was owned by a guy by the name of Ralph Johnson, who's now in the nursing home. He's like 90-some years old. And he sold it to Ray Schrock. He was a Amish bishop, and now he's in the nursing home down at Blair also. And he told me that this was the Carpenter farm. And I also heard or read or something that he had like a whole section of land, which is 640 acres. And as you look over around here, we just looked at the school. Very likely that was part of the. And you said that his name was all around the school
Or
for
the
the
land,
land. So very likely that is true. That's his farm. Let's think a little bit about that when they came into this country. These people, how do they farm? I mean, they come in. They obviously had horses. There might have even been a few oxen, that they were farming with. They wouldn't be producing too much, because a lot of it was food for themselves, big gardens, canning, I suppose, and using horse labor, for getting the work done. So they have 640, they wouldn't have been able to do all that.
No, I imagine they sold some of it off then.
Yeah, I suppose that's what happens,
And it used to be that Trempealeau County was big wheat growing. That was the main thing here. And then they had problems with a bug that got into the wheat, a cinch bug. And so every year the crop would be a little bit poorer and a little bit poorer, and that was kind of one of the things that got people interested in dairying, because they thought it was the wheat thing was just playing out. And the people that wanted to keep raising wheat, they moved farther west. They went out into the Dakotas and Minnesota. But originally there was a lot of wheat grown in this county, and this would be flat land and
it's
lighter soil.
Yeah, it's productive soil, productive.
Probably easier to farm than stuff up on the hills, or if it's heavy clay or whatever. So that's kind of the first land that got taken up in this county are the flatter, nicer areas, which makes sense. Yeah.
Well, back, in my memory, which goes back 80 some years here.
Well, that's good.
It was dairy farms, dairy farms all over the place. Now I was told by someone who lived in the next era behind me that back then they raised the farming. This would be after carpenters moved into this area, but they raised they raised cattle for milking, for raising money. And they raised tobacco, a lot of tobacco, and they cut woods out of the woods for because everybody burned wood back then. So he told me that those were the three things that they did, back in those days. But this carpenter came in. He was one of the pioneers you mentioned he came in with a few other people, and Henry Lake you mentioned.
Yeah, Carpenter's wife was a Lake. So I wonder if there was a relation to Henry Lake, whose namesake is Lakes Cooley. I don't know. I wasn't able to trace down and make that, but it's a logical assumption that there might have been some relation there.
Well, Henry Lake, that's exactly opposite what they call the dam in Blair.
Right.
And we're in Preston Township here, so we're not too far from Blair, maybe 3 miles or something like that.
Well,
Lake Henry.
I think we're actually in Blair right now.
Oh,
remember?
That could be. Well, there's a sand mine just
remember
a few hundred feet up above us here.
They took up a bunch of this land and made it part of the city of Blair. So right now we might be standing in Blair.
Yeah, this is one of the first Trempealeau County landmines behind us here. And you can hear the noise as we're working.
You can hear the noise, yeah, and that's the reason we couldn't go down and get a lot of shots of Carpenter Bridge, because there were a lot of trucks hauling sand from the other side of the road and crossing the bridge. And I wanted to mention, it's kind of interesting, we don't realize back when the first settlers come in and there weren't any bridges, how important those bridges were when they finally got them built. It was really tough. I mean, we might not have any big rivers like Mississippi or Missouri here, but even crossing a small one with horses and wagons is difficult. And so the bridges were very important.
They were real important. Coming through the creeks and rivers, they had to have a pretty good bottom, and then you couldn't have any high areas on either side. They had to be down so you could make it through. And then how about floods, you know?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
It can change the contours of the land pretty easily.
Well, is there anything else we should talk about?
Probably we have covered it, but people that see this and think that maybe they have relatives out here, like this is Bachenhauer, and I've seen, there were Bachenhauers down by Galesville. People back in there whose name was Hankin, and over here was like I say, I don't know if it's Lau or Lou, how they say it, and Bestwick. Maybe somebody watching this will say, well, that's where great grandpa's buried. Yeah. You never know.
And then somebody might say that isn't the largest stone here in Trempealeau County.
We throw down the challenge right now.
Yeah.
If somebody's cemetery has a bigger stone than they have here at Carpenter, then they should let us know. But that is huge, and when you're going by on the road, I guess I never really noticed it, but it's big.
Well, I never noticed it really either, you know?
Yeah, it's massive.
Yeah, it's absolutely huge.
Yeah. Well,
I want to thank the 2 young ladies that are helping me today with this Discover Trempealeau County.
Call us young. I love that.
Nancy Bergman. She knows a lot about a lot of things.
Oh yeah.
Especially history. If you want to find out anything about history, she'll dig in and she knows how to find it.
Well, I can do that. Yeah.
And Mary Anderson, I've only worked with her once before, but she's phenomenal.
She is.
For a camera person. Lucky that Trempealeau County Community Television has somebody like her.
You need good
She
people.
can be on front of the camera or with the camera. She's good either way. Multi-talented. So we want to thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Discover Trempealeau County show. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Barry Zivan, and you're watching TCC TV. You're lucky to be doing so.